Before you scroll away, imagine this: your child, inches from danger, and the only thing standing between her and the unthinkable, is a dog you were never sure you could trust. This isn't just a story. It's a moment where instinct met sacrifice. If you believe that love can wear fur, and that heroes come in silence, then stay. Like this video, subscribe for more stories that heal, and let this one show you what a single act of courage can mean. Austin, Texas, was entering one of those late spring stretches where the sun clung to the sky a little longer each day, casting honey-colored light over the quiet neighborhoods tucked just beyond the city's bustling heart. The air smelled faintly of chlorine and cut grass, and the breeze carried a sleepy warmth, making everything feel like it was in slow motion. On the outskirts of the city, in a sleepy cul-de-sac lined with maple trees just beginning to bud, a pale yellow bungalow stood with a modest front porch and a backyard that opened to a shimmering blue pool. It was a house meant for healing. Madeline Carter had never expected to be starting over at 34. Tall and slender, with auburn hair often pulled into a low, unstyled ponytail and the tired eyes of someone who had seen too much too young, she moved like someone carrying invisible weight. Her scrubs no longer bore the neat, cheerful badges of the pediatric ICU where she once worked; she had traded them for oversized sweatshirts and quiet afternoons. Grief had dulled her, but not broken her. Her late husband, Brian, had been a paramedic, the type who whistled while folding laundry and cracked dry jokes no matter the chaos around him. A car accident had taken him in a moment that rewired Madeline's entire sense of time. Now, the days passed slowly but the months galloped, and everything still smelled like a hospital corridor. She and her 2-year-old daughter Harper had lived in the city apartment for months after the funeral, but the walls began to close in, too many echoes, too many empty cups waiting for a second person. So Madeline did what broken people often do: she moved somewhere quieter. The bungalow in the suburbs had come with a backyard pool. It wasn't fancy, just a rectangle of turquoise water surrounded by white pavers and an aging wooden fence, but Harper loved it immediately. She called it the Big Blue Tub. To Madeline, it felt like a second chance. There were no sirens here, no elevators, no beeping monitors, just the breeze through cottonwood leaves and the occasional chirp of crickets. Harper was a whirlwind of soft blonde curls and curious questions, small for her age but fiercely independent. She had inherited her father's deep dimples and her mother's habit of observing before speaking. Though only 2, Harper had an uncanny way of sensing when her mother was overwhelmed, quieting her own chatter to sit beside her on the floor, as if presence alone could mend a broken thing. But it wasn't enough. Madeline had noticed it one Tuesday morning while sitting poolside with her lukewarm coffee. Harper had begun talking to her stuffed animals more than real people. She seemed lonely, in a way children shouldn't be. And Madeline couldn't offer everything. Not yet. That was when the idea came. It had been bubbling in the back of her mind for months, ever since Harper had knelt beside a neighbor's old Labrador and kissed its gray muzzle. "Doggy," she had whispered. "You sad too?" Madeline hadn't planned on adopting anything. She barely felt qualified to parent a toddler, much less rehabilitate a rescue animal. But the loneliness in Harper's voice, and the ache in her own chest, overruled logic. The Austin Second Chance shelter was modest, built into a refurbished firehouse at the edge of town. Inside, the smell of bleach and fur mingled with the high-pitched echo of barking. A volunteer named Laura, mid-20s with cropped blue hair and a tired smile, welcomed them. Laura had the look of someone who had once been fiercely idealistic but now measured hope in teaspoons. She handed Madeline a clipboard and gestured toward the kennels. "Most of them are good with kids," she said. "Some just need time." That was when Madeline saw him. In the far back, behind a chain-link door, a large German shepherd lay curled in the corner of his run. He didn't bark. He didn't lift his head when they passed. His coat was coarse and uneven, peppered with faded scars that peeked through tufts of black and tan. One ear had a small notch missing, like a torn postage stamp. But it was his eyes that caught Madeline's breath, deep amber, old in a way no creature should be, watching everything but demanding nothing. Shadow, Lara said, noticing her gaze. 6 years old. Came in from a ranch 3 counties over. We think he was trained as a guard dog, then abandoned. No aggression noted, but he doesn't engage much. Madeline knelt by the gate. Harper toddled forward, clutching a half-eaten animal cracker, and pressed it through the fence. Shadow didn't sniff. He didn't bark. He simply sat up slowly and lowered his head, watching the toddler with an expression that wasn't quite curiosity but something quieter. Recognition, perhaps. Or resignation. For a full minute, no one moved. Then Harper giggled. He's sleepy, she announced. Shadow blinked. Then, slowly, cautiously, he placed one paw against the metal gate, not scratching or pressing, just resting it there. Madeline's throat tightened. He's not what people expect, Lara offered. Somewhat a tail wagger. He's more of a watcher. Madeline stood, her hands trembling around the clipboard. We'll take him. Back at the house, Shadow's entrance was almost ghostly. No barking, no circling. He sniffed each room like someone memorizing blueprints, his movements slow and mechanical. Harper followed him like a duckling. When he settled by the back door, she sat beside him and began coloring in a book. Madeline watched from the kitchen window, heart pounding. Later that evening, after Harper fell asleep on the rug with her hand resting on Shadow's haunch, Madeline knelt beside them. Shadow didn't move, but his eyes tracked her. She whispered, I don't know if I'm ready. But thank you for trying. Outside, the sky deepened into indigo. A breeze stirred the pool's surface, sending ripples across the still water like soft breathing. The house didn't feel quite like home yet, but it was quieter. Warmer. And for the first time in a long time, Madeline didn't feel entirely alone. The days that followed Shadow's arrival unfolded like a slow dance, measured, cautious, but not without rhythm. The air in Austin had taken on that early summer weight, warm but still breathable, thick with the scent of sunscreen, blooming oleander, and chlorine. Each afternoon, the backyard pool shimmered like a sheet of glass under the golden sun, and Harper, always barefoot, made it her stage. She'd clumsily tiptoe along the edge, her little fingers brushing the metal railings, her blonde curls bouncing with each giggle. And always nearby, watching without a sound, lay Shadow. Shadow had claimed a particular spot near the corner of the pool, beneath the partial shade of a crepe myrtle tree. He'd lie with his chin on his front paws, ears slightly tilted forward, eyes tracking every splash Harper made. He never barked, never moved unless she strayed too far from the edge. At first, Madeline had thought it was instinct or perhaps boredom. But after a week, she realized, it was vigilance. Shadow was not relaxing, he was guarding. And that frightened her more than it comforted her. Madeline had read too many stories in the ER, listened to too many panicked parents whisper through sobs about how it only took a second. She'd treated the aftermath of accidents, the accidental falls, the unthinkable bites. And now, she had a 2-year-old girl beside a 90-pound German shepherd and a deep body of water. Her anxiety came in waves, small but persistent. No matter how still Shadow seemed, she couldn't silence the quiet worry rising in her. Still, she didn't remove him from Harper's side. Not yet. Each day, as Harper dipped her toes in the pool and tossed plastic ducks into the water, Madeline sat in a lounge chair with her coffee, trying to read but never turning the page. Her eyes remained on the pair, the child and the dog, and the silence between them that she couldn't yet interpret. It was during one of those afternoons that Madeline's phone buzzed with a text from her neighbor, Nora. You coming to the Thursday group? Still holding space for you. Nora Pierce lived 2 houses down. In her early 50s, she was a former grief counselor turned yoga teacher. Short, with gray-streaked hair usually tied in a low bun and a penchant for linen dresses and humming to herself, Nora had a calming presence that Madeline found both comforting and mildly infuriating. She always seemed to be 10 breaths ahead of every storm. When they'd first met at the mailbox, Nora had gently mentioned a small, healing circle she hosted weekly, mostly women, some widowed, some not. They didn't promise solutions, only a space to speak or sit in silence. This week, Madeline texted back. "I'll come." And she did. The gathering was held in Nora's screened-in porch, its walls lined with hanging plants and soft floor cushions. Madeline arrived just after sunset, the air thick with lavender incense and the low hum of crickets outside. There were 5 other women already seated in a loose circle, sipping tea. One was in her 20s with freshly shaved hair and tired eyes. Another had laugh lines that seemed like battle scars. No one asked for introductions. Nora simply nodded at her, and Madeline found a seat. It wasn't until the circle ended, nearly 2 hours later, after shared silences and passing tissues, that she met Eli Grant. Eli wasn't part of the circle. He arrived at the end, carrying 2 crates of pet food. Tall, with a wiry frame and sun-browned skin, Eli looked like someone who spent more time with animals than people. His t-shirt was dusted with dog hair, and his voice was low, calm, unhurried. He had a small scar running from the corner of his jaw to his neck, old, faded, barely noticeable unless you were close. Nora introduced him as a local trainer who worked with rescue dogs, particularly those with trauma. "I hear you took in Shadow," Eli said, giving Madeline a gentle nod. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "Word travels fast. Big dog. Quiet. Scarred." He shrugged. "Hard to forget." They stood outside the porch, the sky above them a deep navy with stars beginning to bloom. Eli leaned against the wooden railing. "He doesn't trust easily," he said. "But when he chooses someone, he doesn't let go." Madeline watched the breeze ripple through the trees, unsure how much of her fear to confess. "I'm not afraid of him, exactly. Just, unsure." Eli nodded as if he understood more than her words. "He won't hurt her." Madeline studied him. "You sound certain." "I've worked with dogs who bite because they've never been loved," Eli said, voice steady. "Shadow doesn't bite. He waits." The conversation stuck with her long after she'd returned home. The next day, Harper insisted on swimming with her floaties. Madeline sat beside the pool with her feet in the water, one hand gripping her coffee, the other twitching every time Harper leaned too far over her inflatable ring. Shadow lay in his usual spot, eyes fixed on Harper like a sentinel. Not stiff, just present. Later that afternoon, as Madeline cleared the dishes, she noticed something strange. Harper had lined up her toy ducks on Shadow's back, and he hadn't moved. The dog sat stone still, allowing her to place a tiny bucket on his head like a crown. He didn't shake it off. He didn't flinch. And in that moment, Madeline saw something she hadn't dared believe before: trust, small, quiet, and real. That night, Harper fell asleep on the living room rug, clutching Shadow's ear like a security blanket. Madeline didn't move her. Instead, she sat nearby, phone in hand, rereading Eli's contact card Nora had texted her. Her thumb hovered over the call button, then retreated. Not yet, she thought. But maybe soon. Outside, the wind danced across the surface of the pool, scattering the moon's reflection into 1,000 silver shards. The sun in Austin had begun its seasonal shift, burning a little brighter by late morning and hanging longer in the sky as summer approached. The backyard had become a rhythm of its own, early splashes, midday stillness, and the hum of cicadas accompanying the golden haze of evening. The pool glimmered like a calm eye in the center of their little world, and each day it welcomed 2 familiar figures, Harper and Shadow. Harper's bond with Shadow had blossomed with the ease and certainty only children possess. She no longer asked permission. She no longer looked to her mother for reassurance. Shadow had become a fixture in her world, like her blankie or the moon, always there, always watching. Each morning after breakfast, she would press her face against the back door and call out in a voice that skipped like stones over water, "Shadow, come play." Shadow would rise from his spot near the laundry room and quietly follow her into the backyard. He didn't bark. He didn't wag exuberantly. He simply walked with her, matching her pace, lying beside her when she sat, positioning himself always between Harper and the water. To an outsider, he might have looked indifferent. But to Madeline, who had begun to notice the subtleties, it was clear, Shadow was choosing vigilance over play, duty over ease. One late morning, Madeline stood at the kitchen sink, watching them. Harper was lining up her toy dolphins on the pool's edge, narrating some grand aquatic adventure to no one in particular. Shadow, as usual, was stretched beside her, eyes half-lidded but tracking her every move. Madeline sipped her coffee slowly, feeling the edge of worry that once gripped her begin to dull. The past few weeks had begun carving out a routine, something almost resembling peace. That afternoon, she drove over to Eli Grant's training center, Second Paw Ranch, a low, wide property on the outskirts of Travis County. Built from reclaimed wood and corrugated steel, it looked more like an old barn than a canine rehabilitation space, but the fenced yards and agility zones hinted at its purpose. Madeline had agreed to bring Shadow by for a checkup session, not because he was misbehaving, but because she still didn't fully understand him. And Eli, with his calm eyes and quiet expertise, had earned her trust more quickly than most. Eli greeted her near the gates, tossing a frisbee to a young Labrador with 3 legs and a burst of endless joy. Dressed in worn jeans and a gray tank top, his arms were sun-browned and inked with faded tattoos, one of which Madeline noticed was a small paw print over his collarbone. He tipped his cap as she approached. "Wasn't sure you'd come," he said, offering Shadow a low whistle. "I wasn't sure either," she replied, clipping the leash around Shadow's collar. "But I thought, maybe you could help me understand what goes on in that head." Eli nodded. "Let's see what he tells us." They walked together toward the shaded field, letting Shadow explore off-leash. The dog sniffed the perimeter slowly, occasionally glancing back at Madeline as if to make sure she hadn't vanished. He didn't chase toys. Didn't bark at the other dogs. He simply patrolled the area, then lay under the shade of a mesquite tree with his back to the wind. "He doesn't play," Madeline said. "He's not here to play," Eli answered simply. "He's here to stay aware." Eli crouched beside Shadow and held out his palm, not for a command, but for acknowledgement. Shadow sniffed it, then placed a paw there gently. "No tricks, no treat expected." "See that?" Eli murmured. "That's trust. Not excitement. Not performance. Trust." Madeline crouched beside them. "But what if one day I miss something? What if he snaps?" Eli looked at her, his gaze even. "He won't. He's made his choice. Dogs like Shadow. Once they attach, they don't betray it. But I get it. You've seen the worst, haven't you?" Madeline hesitated. "I worked trauma pediatrics for 8 years. Saw what happens when people underestimate danger. I swore I'd never let that be me." Eli was quiet for a moment, then said, "Shadow's not a danger. He's your buffer. The space between Harper and everything that could go wrong." Madeline didn't answer right away. Instead, she watched Shadow shift positions slightly to face her. His ears twitched. A small exhale escaped him. The moment felt fragile, like a soap bubble between them. Later, back at home, Harper brought Shadow her new favorite treasure, a purple plastic crown she got at the grocery store. She placed it on his head, adjusting it until it sat just right, then clapped. "King Shadow," she announced. Shadow didn't flinch. He simply blinked slowly, as though absorbing the honor of the title. Madeline laughed under her breath from the patio. It was the first time she'd laughed without hesitation in months. As night fell, and Harper lay asleep curled into a blanket on the living room rug, Shadow curled beside her. Madeline stood in the doorway, arms crossed, feeling something shift in her chest, less like letting go, more like letting in. And somewhere in the back of her mind, Eli's voice echoed again. He's not here to play. He's here to stay aware. It rained in Austin the way it always did in early summer, without warning, and with the kind of violence that seemed personal. Lightning flashed in wide, jagged arcs across the sky, illuminating the silhouette of the backyard pool like a brief photograph of chaos. Thunder rolled through the walls like someone dragging furniture across the clouds, and Madeline woke with a start. Her breath came in short bursts. The room was dark, except for the blue-green glow of the baby monitor on the nightstand. Her hair clung to her forehead with sweat, though the air was cool. The dream lingered, sticky and vivid. In it, Shadow had pushed Harper, shoved her, really, hard, and the toddler had fallen headfirst into the pool. Madeline had run, but her legs didn't move fast enough. Shadow was growling in the dream, his teeth bared, Harper sinking beneath the water as if pulled by something deeper than gravity. Madeline sat up, swung her legs over the side of the bed, and pressed her palms to her face. She told herself it wasn't real. Just a dream. Just anxiety shaping itself into fangs. But it had felt real. Too real. She walked barefoot down the hallway, past framed photos she couldn't yet bear to take down, Brian in a Halloween costume, Harper in her arms, all smiles and pirate hats. She paused outside Harper's door and listened. A soft, rhythmic breathing, the innocent sound of a child untouched by fear. Then she turned toward the laundry room. That's where Shadow slept. He lay curled on the old rug, ears twitching in his sleep. Not a sound escaped him. Not even a sigh. And still, she hesitated. The next morning, the storm had passed, but its weight hadn't left her chest. Clouds still loitered over the city like they didn't want to go home. The pool was littered with leaves and one lonely float, half deflated and bobbing near the steps. Madeline sipped her coffee but didn't taste it. Harper, unbothered by her mother's mood, was dancing in the kitchen, wearing mismatched socks and singing to her cereal. She had put a band-aid on her teddy bear's nose and told Shadow, very seriously, that he was now Dr. Dog. Shadow sat beside her, still and alert, absorbing every word like gospel. Madeline turned her phone screen away as she scrolled through her call history. The number was still there, the shelters. She hesitated, thumb hovering above the screen. And then, in a swift motion, she tapped it and pressed the phone to her ear. It rang twice. "Second Chance Rescue, this is Dana," came the voice. Female, young. Kind but efficient. Madeline's voice was low. "Hi. I adopted a German Shepherd from you about a month ago. His name's Shadow." "Oh, yes. Big guy. Quiet, right?" "Yeah. That's him. I was just wondering," she paused. "If things weren't working out, what the return policy is." There was silence on the other end, then a soft reply, "Are there behavioral issues?" "No," Madeline said quickly. "No, nothing like that. He's fine. She glanced at Harper. "I'm not sure I'm the right person for him." Dana's voice gentled. "If you want to talk more, we can arrange a call with our trainer, or even a foster backup if you feel overwhelmed." Madeline's throat tightened. "Okay. I'll think about it." She hung up before anything else could be said. That afternoon, she drove to the community garden to pick up herbs for dinner, a place she used to frequent with Brian, who always insisted on fresh rosemary for roast chicken. The garden's caretaker, Mrs. Inez Alvarez, was a small woman in her late 60s with deep tan skin, soft crow's feet, and a braid that ran like a river of silver down her back. She wore thick gloves and a sun hat that made her look like a gentle scarecrow, always humming old boleros as she weeded. "Your little one is not with you today?" Mrs. Alvarez asked, wiping her hands on her apron. "No," Madeline replied. "She's home with our dog." Mrs. Alvarez smiled. "Ah, animals and children. They understand each other in ways we never quite can. Madeline nodded, though she didn't feel understood at all. On the way back, she stopped at a red light and saw a dog darting through traffic, thin, panicked, collarless. A man chased after it, shouting, "Buddy! Buddy!" but the dog kept running. Madeline gripped the wheel tighter. Her mind flashed to Shadow, how still he always was. How he never ran. Never barked. Never chased. Back home, she found Harper asleep on the living room rug, a coloring book open beside her. Shadow lay curled at her feet. Her crayon-scrawled drawings had spilled over the page and onto his paw, purple and green swirls marking his fur like a child's flag of ownership. He hadn't moved. Not even to shake it off. Madeline sat down slowly on the couch, her arms crossed over her chest, eyes locked on the pair. That evening, she texted Eli. "Do you have a minute?" The reply came within seconds. "Always. Come by or call." Call. They spoke for over an hour. Madeline, sitting on the back steps, bare feet on the cool stone, told him about the dream. About the phone call to the shelter. About how she felt like she was holding a grenade with the pin halfway out. Eli didn't interrupt. When she finished, he said, "You know, the brain's a liar when it's afraid." Madeline laughed, a dry, almost bitter sound. "It's not lying. I've seen what happens when people ignore warning signs." Right. But Shadow isn't a warning sign. He's not barking, snapping, pacing. He's calm. Present. Your brain's preparing for a danger that isn't there, because once, it didn't see the one that was. Madeline was quiet. Eli added, softer this time, "Sometimes, the thing we're most afraid of is the thing keeping us safe." There was silence between them for a while, but it was the kind that healed, not hurt. Madeline looked out over the pool, where moonlight reflected off the water in broken lines. And slowly, quietly, she began to believe him. The scent of cinnamon and baked peaches floated through the kitchen, wrapping itself around Madeline like a soft lullaby. She had just set the timer on the oven, 22 minutes left until the crumble was golden, and the rhythmic hum of the dishwasher added to the gentle domestic symphony. Outside, the sky was wide and blue, unbothered by clouds, and the afternoon sun shimmered like molten gold across the surface of the pool. Harper, wearing her bright red swimsuit dotted with tiny white daisies, had insisted on wearing her floaties, even though she wasn't planning to swim. Just in case, she had said with that matter-of-fact tone only toddlers could pull off. She was currently squatting by the edge of the water, her plastic duck army lined up in battle formation. The concrete was warm beneath her bare feet, the shadows short and sharp around her. Shadow was nearby, as always. The large German shepherd sat under the shade of the patio umbrella, his body still but alert. His thick coat, though groomed, still bore signs of a life lived hard, small healed-over patches where fur grew differently, a faded scar near his right hip. His ears twitched every time Harper splashed water or giggled, but he never moved unless necessary. He was her silent guardian, her statue of fur and muscle. Madeline turned from the oven to the kitchen window, smiling at the sight of her daughter mimicking swimming lessons with rubber ducks. She reached for her phone, thinking maybe she'd snap a picture, this rare, perfect moment. That was when everything changed. In the blink of an eye, Shadow surged forward like a bullet. Not a bark. Not a growl. Just pure movement. His body collided with Harper's small frame, jaws grabbing the back of her swimsuit just below the neck and yanking with a force that lifted her clean off the ground. Her floaty spun awkwardly in the air as her body flopped backward like a doll. Madeline's scream cracked the silence. Her hands slapped the countertop, eyes wide with disbelief. Every story she'd ever heard, every instinct she'd buried, roared to the surface. He's attacking her. I should have listened. Oh God, he's going to kill her. She sprinted out the back door, barefoot, heart slamming into her ribs like a drum of war. Harper was now lying on the grass 3 feet from the pool's edge, dazed, a smear of green on her elbow and one sandal flung several yards away. Shadow stood between her and the water, his body taut and low, his gaze locked not on Harper, but on the pool itself. Madeline reached Harper first, dropped to her knees, and pulled her daughter into her arms. "Are you hurt? Baby, are you hurt?" Her fingers checked for blood, for bites, for broken bones. Harper whimpered and clutched her mom's shirt. Then she heard it. A hiss. Soft, wet. Sinister. Madeline turned toward the sound, and her stomach turned to ice. Floating inches from where Harper had just been sitting was a large water moccasin, its body thick and muscular, triangular head raised above the waterline, mouth open slightly in a warning display. A cottonmouth. Its pale white mouth interior contrasted like a flash of bone, its tongue flicking. It hovered at the edge of the pool like it owned it. She understood now. Every motion. Every choice. Shadow had seen it first. Madeline's eyes flew to him. The dog was now backing slowly away from the pool, head lowered, tail stiff. His breathing was shallow. Something was wrong. He took a step, then stumbled. Madeline noticed the swelling. His front leg, just above the paw, had started to balloon, the skin stretching unnaturally tight. A small puncture mark, a bite, oozed a smear of blood. His tongue lolled. Foam was beginning to collect at the corner of his mouth. His body trembled. "No, no, no, no," she whispered. "Eli." She needed Eli. She pulled her phone from her back pocket with shaking fingers and dialed. He picked up on the second ring. "Madeline?" "It's Shadow," she gasped. He pulled Harper from the pool. "There was a snake. He got bit, I think it's a cottonmouth. He's going down fast. Get him in the car. I'll call the clinic. Go now." Madeline hung up and wrapped Shadow's massive frame in the only thing she could find, the large beach towel Harper had left on the lounge chair. He groaned, barely able to hold his weight. She cradled Harper on one hip and dragged the dog with the other hand, staggering toward the garage. The drive to the emergency vet was a blur of red lights she ignored, sharp turns, and tears she didn't realize were falling. Shadow lay in the back seat, his body shuddering with every breath, eyes barely open. Madeline kept talking to him, through sobs, through apologies. "I doubted you," she whispered. "I thought you were dangerous. But you never doubted her." Harper was silent now, her hand pressed to the glass, watching the blur of streets. By the time they skidded into the parking lot, Eli was already outside, holding the clinic door open as 2 vet techs ran with a stretcher. Shadow was lifted gently, oxygen placed near his snout. Madeline stood in the doorway as they disappeared behind swinging doors. She dropped to her knees on the pavement, Harper clutched tight to her chest. Her daughter was safe. But her dog was dying. The morning began with the kind of deceptive calm that only summer knows how to wear. The pool in the backyard shimmered a soft aquamarine beneath the rising sun, and everything in the Carter house moved with practiced ease. Madeline was in the kitchen slicing bananas for Harper's breakfast while the little girl tugged her floaties onto her arms, a ritual she insisted on even if she didn't plan to swim. Outside, the birds were louder than usual, and the breeze was still. The air felt heavier than it should have. Shadow stood by the sliding door, his body tall and motionless, eyes fixed beyond the glass. He had barely touched his food that morning. Something about him made Madeline pause. His posture wasn't tense, but it was alert, his head slightly forward, his ears twitching toward something unseen. "Shadow," she said softly, "what is it?" But he didn't move. Harper ran past them with her usual exuberance, her hands clutching a red rubber duck, the crown she'd placed on Shadow's head the day before now sitting crookedly on her own. "Let's go, Shadow," she sang, pushing open the door and padding barefoot onto the warm patio stone. Shadow followed, slower than usual. Madeline poured herself a coffee and stood at the sink, looking out through the window that framed the pool. She saw Harper crouch near the edge, dipping her duck into the water, her tiny voice narrating some wild aquatic drama. Shadow lingered near the opposite side of the pool, eyes locked on the water. He wasn't watching Harper. He was watching something else. Madeline's stomach twisted, though she couldn't say why. She placed the coffee down, wiping her hands instinctively on her jeans, and leaned closer to the glass. Then it happened. In a blur, Shadow lunged forward, not toward Harper, but behind her, his body moving with such violence and speed that for a second, Madeline's heart seized. Harper shrieked, not from pain, but surprise, as Shadow collided with her back, grabbing the neck of her life jacket in his teeth and yanking her sideways with a force that sent her tumbling to the grass. Madeline screamed. She dropped the coffee. It shattered against the tile floor, but she didn't hear it. Her body moved on instinct. She tore through the sliding door, sprinting barefoot across the patio. Harper was crying but sitting up, grass stains on her knees, a scratch blooming across her cheek like a thin pink thread. Shadow, however, wasn't moving. He lay on his side near the edge of the pool, convulsing. Foam gathered at the corners of his mouth, and his front leg jerked uncontrollably. His breaths were sharp and erratic, his eyes glassy. No, 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 Madeline fell to her knees beside him. Her hands moved from his ribs to his neck to his paws, trying to understand, trying to fix what she didn't yet comprehend. Then she saw it. Floating near the edge of the pool, half submerged, its body undulating gently like ribbon in water, was a snake, black and brown with pale markings along its back, its mouth slightly open to reveal white tissue like the inside of a tulip. A cottonmouth. Her breath vanished. Cottonmouths were among the most venomous snakes in the American South. Aggressive when threatened, often lurking near bodies of water. She remembered the warnings from neighbors when she first moved in, watch for movement near the pool, especially after rain. She had never thought one would come so close. It took a full minute before the pieces fell together in her mind. Shadow hadn't attacked Harper. He hadn't snapped or panicked. He had seen the threat before she ever could. He had placed himself between Harper and the strike. And now he was dying for it. Madeline's vision blurred. She scooped Harper into her arms, checking again, no bites, just the scratch. Harper was sobbing but conscious, her breath hiccuping between each cry. "Shoo, you're okay. You're okay," Madeline whispered, though she wasn't sure if she meant Harper or herself. She laid her daughter on the outdoor lounge chair and ran back to Shadow. He was still twitching, though the movements were slowing. A dark swelling was beginning to spread from his front paw up toward his shoulder. "No, no, no, don't do this. Don't leave." Her hands trembled. She looked around wildly, her mind darting between panic and memory. The emergency vet hospital, 10 miles away. Traffic. Time. 100 variables she couldn't control. She ran inside, grabbed a beach towel, her keys, her phone. She wrapped Shadow's massive frame as best she could, trying not to jostle him too much as she dragged him across the patio stone. Her muscles screamed in protest. He was solid, heavy, limp. Her arms were burning by the time she hoisted him into the back of her SUV. Harper was strapped into her car seat, clutching her duck, silent now, her eyes wide with something she didn't understand but clearly felt. Shadow let out a low, guttural moan as the hatchback door slammed shut. Madeline flew down the road like a phantom, running red lights, horn blaring, her voice trembling as she begged the universe, "Please, just hold on. Hold on. Please." When she reached the vet clinic, the techs were already waiting outside. Eli had called ahead. She hadn't even realized she'd dialed him. A young vet in navy scrubs with short copper hair took one look at Shadow and shouted, "Get the antivenom, stat." Then they vanished through swinging doors, leaving Madeline clutching her chest in the parking lot, her knees nearly buckling. The glass of the front entrance reflected her back at her, a woman barefoot, tear-streaked, holding a toddler who looked just as stunned. She whispered to Harper, "He saved you." And as the storm in her heart finally broke, Madeline realized the truth: Shadow hadn't hesitated. Not for a second. He had chosen to protect. The vet clinic smelled of antiseptic and wet fur, a combination that Madeline would have once associated with calm care, but now only stirred dread in her stomach. The air conditioning hummed with false serenity, too cold for the sweat lining her neck and back. Shadow had been whisked away the moment the clinic doors swung open, his unconscious body disappearing behind a pair of pale green scrubs and soft voices that moved faster than her thoughts. Madeline stood frozen in the entrance vestibule, Harper curled against her chest, silent now, thumb in her mouth, her wide eyes never leaving the hallway where they had taken Shadow. Her red flow tie was still around one arm, lopsided and absurd, as if they had all been yanked out of a dream mid-scene. She barely heard the receptionist, a middle-aged man with cropped gray hair and rectangular glasses, ask if she wanted to sit. He looked like someone who had seen his share of panicked pet owners and knew when to offer comfort, and when to let silence do the work. His name tag read George. He moved slowly, with the careful patience of someone who had once been hurried and paid for it. Madeline sat down anyway, on one of the molded plastic chairs in the waiting room, clutching Harper as though she were still in danger. Her hands trembled as she texted Eli. "We're here. They've taken him back. Please come." Less than 10 minutes later, the front door opened and Eli entered, tall and steady, with his usual faded jeans and sweat-darkened t-shirt. There was dirt on his forearms, as if he'd left a training session midway. His boots echoed across the linoleum floor before he dropped into the seat beside her. "I've got her," he said, and Madeline handed Harper over as if she'd been waiting for someone else to breathe for her. Harper settled onto Eli's lap without protest, curling into the crook of his arm. Eli, for his part, adjusted effortlessly. He stroked her hair back from her face and hummed softly, an off-key tune that sounded like something made up on the spot but held her attention. Madeline buried her face in her hands. "I thought he was going to die in my arms." "He didn't," Eli replied gently. "You got him here. That counts." A nurse stepped into the room about 20 minutes later. She was in her early 30s, with dark skin and a halo of tightly coiled hair pulled into a high bun. Her name tag read Renee. She looked alert and kind, like someone who could deliver terrible news without sounding like the end of the world. "Shadow's stable for now," she said. "We've administered antivenom and started 4 fluids. His breathing is shallow but improving." Madeline blinked. "Is he conscious?" "Not yet," Renee said. "But his vitals are holding. The next 12 hours will be critical. If there's no neurological compromise, he should make a full recovery. We'll need to monitor for swelling and possible clotting, but he's strong." She paused. "Your dog is one hell of a fighter." Madeline choked back a sob. "He saved her. He saw the snake before I even knew something was wrong." Renee's gaze softened. "That kind of bond, between a dog and a child, it doesn't just happen. He chose her." As Renee left, Eli handed Harper a juice box from the vending machine and turned toward Madeline. "You didn't just save him," he said. "You trusted him. When it mattered." "I didn't at first," she whispered. "I hesitated. I called the shelter, Eli. I asked about returning him." Eli nodded but didn't look surprised. "Fear makes us do that. Look for exits." Madeline exhaled slowly, as if every breath she'd taken since the snake attack had been borrowed. He didn't look for an exit. Not once. They sat in the waiting room for over an hour. George, the receptionist, occasionally walked by and offered quiet updates. Shadow was responding to fluids, swelling in the paw was slowing, his heartbeat was stabilizing. Harper eventually fell asleep on Eli's chest, her lips slightly open, her fingers curled into his collar. Madeline leaned back in her chair, her eyes rimmed red but dry now. Through the glass doors of the emergency area, she could just make out the outline of Shadow through the observation window, bandages on his leg, monitors attached to his chest, but still breathing. Still fighting. Renee returned once more just after midnight. "He's waking up," she said softly. "Do you want to see him?" Madeline nodded. Eli handed Harper to her gently, and she followed Renee through the swinging doors, heart pounding. The room was dimly lit, quiet but alive with the soft hum of machines. Shadow lay curled on a padded mat, a thick white bandage wrapping his leg and a catheter running along his side. His eyes fluttered open when Madeline stepped closer, golden and glassy but unmistakably aware. She knelt beside him, careful not to startle him. Her hand hovered for a moment before she placed it gently against his shoulder. "You came back," she whispered. Shadow didn't move, but his tail thumped once against the floor. Just once. But it was enough. A sob broke from Madeline's throat, sharp, silent, grateful. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I doubted you." But you never doubted her. Not even for a second. Shadow blinked slowly, as if acknowledging the words, as if saying he didn't need the apology, but he accepted it anyway. She stayed with him for nearly an hour, stroking his fur as he drifted in and out of sleep. By the time she stepped back into the waiting room, dawn was beginning to touch the sky outside with gentle streaks of pink. Eli was still there, Harper now wrapped in his hoodie, sleeping soundly. "He's going to be okay," Madeline said, her voice rough but steadier than it had been in weeks. Eli smiled, weary but warm. "So are you." By morning, the sun stretched across the rooftops of Austin like a golden apology for the chaos of the night before. The light poured through the windows of the veterinary clinic in soft, honeyed shafts, settling over the reception desk and trickling down the hallway like a whisper that said, "You made it." Shadow had made it. Madeline stood at the threshold of room 4, Harper tucked on her hip, still in her polka-dot pajamas with a stain of dried apple juice near the collar. The little girl's curls were flattened on one side, her cheeks still round with sleep, but her eyes were wide and searching. Shadow lay curled on the floor, one leg wrapped thick with gauze, the bandage extending up toward his shoulder like a knight's armor. An 4-line ran to his paw, and the rhythmic beep of the monitor nearby matched the pulse of hope in Madeline's chest. The fur on his chest rose and fell, slow, steady, present. "Shadow," Harper breathed, as if speaking his name too loudly would break the spell. The dog stirred. Madeline stepped forward, her shoes barely making a sound on the tile. Harper squirmed to be let down, and as soon as her feet hit the floor, she ran the remaining steps and flung herself, gently but without hesitation, against Shadow's side. Shadow didn't flinch. He didn't lift his head. But his tail, wrapped in the stillness of pain and sedation, gave a single, slow thump against the floor. One beat. Madeline's breath hitched, and her knees nearly gave way. The relief in her chest was so vast, so sudden, it hurt. That tail wag was the sun rising. It was forgiveness, recognition, loyalty, all in one soundless motion. Renee, the nurse from the night before, stepped into the doorway behind her, coffee in hand, her eyes rimmed with the fatigue of overnight duty but bright with joy. "He did that the second he smelled her," she said quietly. "Didn't move all night." But she walked in, and his whole body knew. Madeline crouched beside them, her hand reaching for Shadow's ear. It was warm, still trembling faintly. "Hey there, you impossible miracle," she whispered. They stayed for over an hour, Harper content to sit cross-legged beside Shadow, feeding him bits of cracker, while Eli arrived quietly with a tray of breakfast sandwiches and coffee. His presence was steady, like a tree that had always been there. "You good?" he asked, setting down the food. Madeline nodded, her eyes never leaving the dog. "Yeah," she said. "I think I am." 2 weeks later, back at home, the world had shifted in the smallest but most significant ways. The pool had a new fence installed, Madeline's final nod to the fragility of safety. A new sign hung near the patio steps, hand-painted by a local artist Eli knew, "Here resides the silent guardian," with a painted paw print in gold. Shadow still limped slightly, but his energy had returned in waves. He followed Harper from room to room like a shadow of his namesake, still quiet, still watching, but now with a calmness that spoke of healing. His fur had grown back in patches, uneven but proud. One afternoon, Madeline stepped onto the back porch and found Harper asleep on a poolside blanket, her cheek pressed to Shadow's side. The dog's body curved protectively around her, his chest rising and falling with the rhythm of rest. Her tiny hand rested on his ribs like a promise that neither of them understood fully, but both believed in. Madeline stood there a long while, arms crossed over her chest, the breeze tugging softly at her sleeves. The sky above was a clear Texas blue. The water in the pool shimmered but held no danger now. Only reflection. Only memory. Later that month, Madeline filed the paperwork with Eli to co-found a local canine training program. Guardian Tales, they called it, a small non-profit focused on rescuing dogs with pasts like Shadow's and pairing them with families willing to offer more than just shelter, purpose, patience, and a chance at redemption. The first class was already full before the website even went live, thanks to a story in the Austin Chronicle. Neighbors who once kept their distance now waved when Madeline walked by. One woman brought homemade biscuits. A retired veteran named Carl dropped off a box of collars and leashes, all labeled with names he'd once called out to dogs long gone. Healing, Madeline realized, wasn't always about moving forward. Sometimes, it was about circling back, relearning the parts of yourself that fear had tried to erase. She had learned to fear the silence. Now, she had learned to listen within it. And in that silence, she'd found a dog. A guardian. A second chance. In the end, maybe the greatest acts of love are the ones no one sees coming, the quiet guard, the silent choice to protect, even when it hurts. Shadow didn't speak. He didn't need to. In one moment, he reminded us that trust isn't built in comfort, but proven in crisis. And in our everyday lives, there may be someone or something we've misjudged, simply because we didn't see the heart beneath the silence. If this story moved you, like the video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe for more true stories that warm and wreck the heart. Now tell me in the comments, have you ever misjudged someone who later proved they were your greatest protector?